Well, video. Yeah, I did it. I hit the button. Alright, I thought I'd talk some more about the Constitution subject. Maybe a preamble, like the original had the Declaration of Independence. You know, some sort of statement of what's wrong, with the current system and what we want to guarantee in a better system. And so an overview, it's this idea of having a more representative democracy, a more accountable democracy, one with that certainly gets people invested in their franchise, that makes them feel like that they have the power, and that they can ultimately fight for and defend things like justice, that there will be something in the system that obliges there to be resolution, that even if it can do something wrong in the short term, in the long run, it's always correctable, that mistakes aren't left unfixed, and that injustices certainly aren't left to sit there. So it's creating accountability, and the biggest flaw in our government now has become its retreat from any accountability. The courts have given the legislatures immunity and the executives, and likewise they've extended the same liberty to the courts. They've made themselves above the law, which is the last act of the despots. It just demonstrates that they have contempt for their role as public servants and are now public tyrants. So that's the kind of thing, like, you just make sure that can't happen. You got to write that into a fundamental leg of the Constitution, that no Congress shall ever have the power to immunize itself against the system it creates, that defines justice for the people. Anyway, that's sort of they're all important issues, so I won't say it's a minor issue, but it's a fundamental. Accountability is what we're trying to create. That's how you create fairness, is to have accountability for the cheating, to have some way of throwing the flag and having the appropriate penalty for misconduct applied, equitable distribution of the burdens of civilization. That's what we're after here. Fairness. That's the word. That's all government's useful. It has no other useful role than to provide what nature cannot. To provide the civilization we're entitled to. That really is. That's all you need. The preamble, fairness. It's about the fairness. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it about the fairness. I don't know what that sound was, but it doesn't matter. I don't think. It seems still recording. Oh, rough day here for me. I'm just not in the mood for this. Anyway, I went to retreat to Bedlam. So the other part of it is this mechanisms of creating the way that we arbitrate or dispense our power. The idea of one man, one vote is a nice idea, but really there has to be some acknowledgement of to fairness, in the sense that obviously some people's votes are more credibly cast than others. Not that you can come up with a mechanism to fix that, but it may be possible. Some people just don't want to do the work required to be a responsible citizen, to be informed and educated and knowledgeable enough and they'll just hold their nose and pull levers. That kind of noise doesn't do democracy any good. But anyway, that's another issue, sub-issue. I mean, the real main things for me are, creating the representation that's real. So it's about the instant runoff voting and getting rid of the geographic bias. Those two fixes are most of the game. But I suppose a preamble also could have something to say about the economy, because that's part of government's role, is regulating the fairness of our participation mechanism. Can't participate without being part of the economy, and that system needs to be fair just like any other. And it seems a preamble to a constitution should have something to say about the right to work in a positive way, not the rhetoric of the greedy Republicans in terms of using that rhetoric, but the right to productive work, a right to honest work, a right to earn your keep, and right to be fairly compensated, not to have your wages driven down by exploitation and desperation, exploitation of desperation. More specifically, the Constitution should find that abhorrent, that we would take advantage of the desperate and wheedle them down to their barest of minimum in terms of what they will accept as compensation, because they have no choice. Giving people no choice is something the Constitution should have something to say about. Situations where people are extorted, that they don't make decisions, they are obliged to act. No decision necessary. The Constitution should find that bothersome. People should always choose to be criminals or bums or thieves. They shouldn't be obligated by a lack of choice. Or a reasonable option, obtainable, sustainable, realistically satisfying options. The Constitution should say something about that. That's part of the dignity of one's existence. It's the ability to find work you can flourish on rather than starve on. This sort of does get into issues of whether you want to be too explicit about defining other systems that I might impose in terms of limits on economy, limits on inheritance, limits on the acquisition of wealth. These things are very corrosive to the idea of a fair game. Inheritance, most specifically, it's so overtly unfair. We give control of the economy based on an entirely arbitrarily unmeritorious, let's put it that way, without any relevance, without merit having any relevance to the acquisition, and that merit should have everything to do with it, not nothing to do with it. That certainly should be a principle codified, principle manifest. Suppose I should get into the laws of, standards of what it is to, what the definition of a crime really is. I suppose fundamentally it's a taking, without a right, without an obligation. If you take for your own gain, from that, that would be a vague definition of a crime, but it's the nature of it. It's, there's probably an eloquent way to say it, and I'm just not thinking of it. Where it's this idea that it's what you value has value, and what you value, you should have a right to have respect for those values. And as long as somebody, I suppose there's trespasses can be permitted when their intent is not malicious, when their intent is not overtly neglectful or irresponsible. But that should always be the principle, is what's the intent? Intent should be 90% of the law or whatever. If the intent is just out of spite, that should be the highest of crime. Any disruption caused merely to be disruptive or petty, or to exact some sort of punishment from your personal perspective, should be considered what it is, the worst kind of waste, and abhorrent to an idea of proportional or just. And and then everything else should be looked at, circumstantially from that premise. If somebody does, kill your wife in the park or something, maybe you have a right to excise your justice, as long as you do it, as long as you don't make a mistake. Maybe vigilantism should be a legitimate expression, but only if you don't get it wrong, or if you don't get it out of proportion. But I don't think we need to go there. I think the idea of creating a system of justice that fits for all humans, that protects the weakest of us and the strongest, that obliges none of us to have to resort to self-defense, but rather encourages all of us to trust in all of us, to trust in our collective interest in creating justice. At least it should be a collective interest. This is part of the sad commentary, is that unfortunately it doesn't appear to be a collective interest in many cases. An awful lot of people who seem to wish to have a system rigged. They enjoy the cheats. They enjoy the benefits of their status as a cheater, or as a group of cheaters. And they don't wish to give up that advantage, that cheat. But that's the whole point of a preamble, is to sort of spell out the fact that, that's not the new system. The new system's going to be accountable, and everybody will be treated fairly, or no one will be, something like that. We'll do it right, or we won't do it at all, or we'll blow it up, or we'll have a draconian punishment for wrong on some offenses. I would argue that public servants should be held to the highest of standards, that almost any transgression, willful transgression, knowledgeable transgression of the rules of their job should get them disposed of. It should be the highest crime. To violate the trust of the people should be worse than, it's a kind of mass murder. It's a super crime, and should be dealt with the harshest of punishment. There'll be no obligation to be a public servant. You'll choose to serve civilization, and if you choose to do it, you got to know you got to do it right. With every bit of yourself, you've got to try your best to do your best, not for yourself, but for the people you're serving. And if you can't meet that simple obligation, then yeah, squish you like a bug. I mean, the tyranny of the original Constitution was all focused on a king and his disciples. But unfortunately, what we've learned is not the kings, it's the people. You know, it's in the nature of humans to see this, to fall into patterns of corruption. You know, it's the nature of one bad apple poisoning pies. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. It's hard to make broad statements because all it takes is one or two people fucking the game to fuck the game. One or two people break the rules with immunity, and you don't have a game anymore. The rest of the players are irrelevant because the rule breakers have all the power. And you know, that's the real enemy here, is a lack of rules. You know, a lack of consistently applied, rock solid, dependable, unassailable, unevadable rules that will prevent the rogues from spoiling it. It's like Rogue Elephant almost. Have a couple of rogue elephants. They go knock down a few fences in Africa, and the people go out and kill all the elephants. It's like everybody gets blamed for the bad behavior of a couple. So a couple of bad apples can ruin your entire civilization. So they've really got to be squished before they can spread their rot. Uh-oh, I see a truck here. Somebody else is installing my faucet. I'm going to be highly offended. So anyway, till next time and such, and so forth and whatnot.